Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really excited for you to get to hear from Jarrod Hoffman today. Welcome, Jarrod.
Hey, thanks for letting me be here.
Yes, and Jarrod is not is we were talking a good bit before we started recording, but Jarrod is also in Tennessee, but the opposite end of the state for me in Memphis, Tennessee. And but Jarrod, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yeah. My parents were divorced when I was 10 years old, and I found porn for the first time at 11 years old. It wasn't until 25 that I saw a therapist myself for the first time, which is a little embarrassing because even at school, which was right outside of Chattanooga, I lived literally three doors down from the counseling office in my dorm. And I walked by every day to meals and I didn't know why anybody would need that. And so now I am making that gap smaller, specifically for teen boys who, are talking about the stuff that's happening at the time it's occurring rather than
Yeah.
10, 20 years later.
That's really cool and a much needed niche, I think. It's just yeah, we that would be a whole episode just talking about the influence of porn and all of that sort of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I know as we were chatting before we started, you were telling me a little bit of your story about moving from grad school and working for a private practice group and then
Hmm.
deciding to make the transition out on your own. And yeah, so tell us that journey.
Yeah, I was sharing with you that quick conversation that I had on a walk with a therapist who just told me, and he does excellent work. He actually sees plenty of my friends, and he told me that I should just expect to get a job out of grad school making 30 to $40,000 a year and probably overworked and maybe even the potential for burnout. And I was on that walk and I thought, I have a family. I want to start a family and have some kids over the next
Hmm.
couple of years. I'm not really interested in burning out and not getting paid enough. And yes, I ended up getting an internship at two private practice groups, and I stayed on with one of them and have learned a lot. It's been extremely difficult, but I make more than $30,000 a year, and we had kids. I probably could have done that regardless of my pay, in hindsight,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's given me a whole lot of freedom and purpose in maybe that I have a bit of an entrepreneurial trait. I've been
Right.
kind of doing stuff for a long time. And so anybody who kind of fits that mold, this is actually very exciting.
Yes, yes, yeah, you're exactly right, and I think that's one of the key things that I think separates people that want to be private practice owners from people that would prefer just to work for a private practice. And I know
Hmm.
that most of my staff is that way. They're not really all that interested in the business side. They want to do their clinical work, but
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
have the freedom and the autonomy that private practice can provide.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you made that transition, I think it's typical for most people right out of grad school to go work for another private practice or go into agency work. What was it that just kind of what were kind of the motivating factors for going out on your own as much as anything?
Some of it definitely has to do with my, yeah, like I said, entrepreneurial kind of like dreams. Part of the thing that was coming to light when I was in the group practice was kind of they have a vision and a model, which is excellent for someone like you're talking about who is
Mm-hmm.
hired. They want to see people, they want you to help them get to be able to see more people versus me, especially wanting to explore and see even what's out there. The things that I'm doing right now, just even 3 years after I graduated, are not even what I expected I would be doing
Oh wow.
in the first year. I remember writing in grad school, okay, I'm going to see, 20 clients. I'm going to take these breaks during my day, and I'm just going to fill my schedule with seeing one-to-one clients. And
Mm-hmm.
even a year later, I was like, oh, I could do groups. And so I started a group. Some of those things are just less available sometimes in the group
Mm-hmm.
practice who has their own identity and agenda.
Yeah, and I think that's another, there are lots of reasons for people to go into private practice, but I think one is really the autonomy, that's the big thing that I hear over and over,
Hmm.
a theme I hear over and over from people. And I know it was for me as well. I mean, just having that autonomy and being able to set your own schedule and determine when and how you're going to work is pretty big.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some of the what have been the things that maybe have caught you by surprise about private practice and maybe lessons learned and that sort of thing?
What we just talked about was kind of an external factor in some ways. What is the group doing that you would rather be doing differently? What is the job expectation, that kind of thing. The thing that's caught me by surprise is the internal part of private practice. And so the
Mm,
things that come up for me are price, right? How much am I charging? And how do I use my expertise? So price and expertise. And when I think about both of those, price and expertise, that's an internal battle that I have to wrestle with. And
yes.
so this is probably something you hear all the time. It's like, what is my rate? What do I charge for my work?
Mm-hmm.
As people who are caught in this kind of expectation that if we are to be really helping people, that we would not charge them very much. And I
Mm-hmm.
have found that not to be true, but I've only found that not to be true as I've grown internally in the value that I have for myself.
Yes.
And so that is something that maybe is we kind of just say, I've even fallen in this trap. Just, hey, you need to raise your rate. It's like you can't raise your rate without doing the work inside. And so then the
Mm-hmm.
other thing would be the expertise. I remember early on in working with this marketing coach trying to get clients because my group did not really calculate it. It's like they really only provided about 25 to 30% of my clients as I was tracking how they came in. So I was trying to build a referral network, and the marketing coach was like, you need to do a training, offer a training. And of course, my first thought is, who am I to offer a
Yeah.
training? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start doing the work on the people I'm offering this training to may not have ever been to a master's program for counseling. And if they have, they probably haven't spent as much time with teenage boys as I have. And, I
Mm-hmm.
can go down the list.
Yeah.
And it takes iterations and effort and a long time. I'd say it's taken 3 years to get to where I am right now. And even recently on the podcast, okay, let's work on being on some podcasts. Man, that first one, frightening,
Mm-hmm.
impossible. Why am I
Right.
being interviewed here? Why would anyone watch me on YouTube? And now I'm like 13 in and it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it's it's that whole struggle of imposter syndrome that I think a
Mhm.
lot of
Mhm.
us struggle with. And even though I've been in private practice for 20 years now, I still struggle with that sometimes. Who am
Mm.
I? What do I know? Kind of thing.
Where does that come up for you?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it's, I guess when part of it is doing this podcast and I interview just some really brilliant people. And, I think, oh gosh, I'm not in their league
Mm.
whatsoever. And it's it's that whole internal struggle of comparing yourselves to others and,
Mm.
living up to kind of some false expectations or narratives that we create around all of that. And so, yeah, and I think it's to your point as far as the internal struggle, it really is so important for us that are in this field and the profession to do our own work and do our own
Mm.
therapy.
Mhm.
And I think that's it just makes us better all the way around, even if it has nothing to do with our therapy practice. But yeah, but it feeds into that. Yeah.
Yes. A story comes to mind when I
Hmm.
raised, or I've heard some people say adjusted. I adjusted my rate because
Uh-huh.
I realized maybe I had some more expertise than I originally had calculated, whatever the reason was. So I moved it. I remember moving it from 145 to 165, which I've learned now that's the same number. 145, 165. I don't know many people who aren't going to come see you because of a $20 difference when it's that expensive,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
not only is it really not much of a change anyway, I was sharing that with one of my clients and they didn't even know how much I was charging them.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, I don't care. What is your rate?"
Yeah.
You don't know how much is charged every time on your credit card? No, I don't care. I networked with someone recently who got the feedback from someone that they could make it $1,000. They wouldn't care because they
Mm-hmm.
truly have gotten value from their time with them.
R-
And that's an
r-
internal thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it
Right.
really it chips away at some of those shame messages I might hear otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the difficulties I think in, in graduate school and academia is that, yeah, true, we are caring and we have compassion for people and that sort of thing. And it's that disconnect between, okay, charging for that, it's kind of like this meta message of, oh, if you charge for kindness and compassion or
Mm-hmm.
expertise along some line, then you're taking advantage of people.
Hmm.
And so, yeah. And so I think that's a struggle for all of us. And, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think it comes up for a lot of people because of just the messages about money that we get when we're
Mm.
growing up, just a
Hmm.
lot of money shaming and that kind of thing.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I like
Hmm.
to tell people nobody bats an eye. My mom's an accountant. They don't care that her rate is $300 or
Hmm.
whatever it is. But for some
Right.
reason, we carry that on to the counseling profession. How
Yeah,
dare
it's
you?
interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how that is. Yeah, and it's the truth of the matter is too is that if you really dig into your own value as a clinician and think about the time and the effort that you've put into getting to licensure,
Mm. Hmm.
as a clinician, you've spent no telling how much money in grad school just to get your education. Um,
Yes.
you've gotten those hours put in, the all of those kinds of things, and then on top of that, having a master's degree. It used to be I need to look up this statistic, but it used to be that only like 10 to 15, and it might have been less than 10% of people within the United States or within the world hold master's degrees. And so
Mm.
yeah. And so it's just really, yeah, recognizing that what you do offer is of value and stuff too. I mean,
Yes.
you don't go through
Yes.
all of that without knowing stuff and really becoming an expert. Yeah. So, yeah. So, what would you say have been the mistakes that you've made along the way?
Wow. Okay. How much time do we have?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. um, I would say mistake. I actually talked to my wife about this. It's like
Uh huh.
we're moving into a transition where she's going to return to work kind of part time. It's a good situation. Our kids can be in the school's sort of daycare, and she said, "Are we making a mistake?" And I'm learning that mistakes aren't permanent most of the time.
Hmm.
So even a
Yeah.
mistake I might have used to say, well, gosh, we got to avoid those at all costs. And now it's like, that would be silly. That would be impossible. Are we making a mistake? Maybe, yeah, but we can 100% recover from the mistake. So, in that language, I made tons of mistakes in the past 3 years. I've and sort of iterated on them. Oh, that was a really terrible post that I made. That's a bad title. No one cares about that kind of wording for their problem. And so then I'll try again and I'll adjust it a little bit. And I'm like, oh wow, that was much better received. And so maybe thinking about it more as like it's the practice of therapy, right? In the same way that
Hmm.
like would you tell someone who's playing basketball like what were your big mistakes? It's like I
Hmm.
miss shots all the time. I
Hmm.
say that, oh man, I could have said that in a much kind of more pointed way on the call with the potential client. So, one
Hmm.
thing that I've done a lot differently recently that might fall into your category of mistake is, I used to, what's the first question they ask? If they can ask a question right away, it's how much
Yeah.
does
Do
your
you take?
rate?
Yeah. How much is
Do
your
you take
rate, or
insurance?
do you take my insurance? Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
unfortunately for them, I don't accept their insurance, and my rate is insane. And it's because I provide a lot of value. I work with teen boys, so I kind of build into my rate that I'm probably going to call their school counselor. I'm going to try to talk to their pediatrician. All these things that, it actually makes my rate very low compared to the work that I do. So what do
Mm-hmm.
they say? They say, do you take my insurance? They'll say that the first sentence if I let them. And
Mm-hmm.
my mistake usually was to address that. Now I sidestep it. I go, hey, we can talk about that stuff. Why don't you tell me why you reached out
Mm-hmm.
first? And then they
Mm-hmm.
go into explaining their problem, what's going on. And then they'll say, okay, so that's what's going on. And what's your rate per session? I say, can I see if I got that right? So you're struggling because your teen boy is lacking confidence and they're throwing tantrums and you really want to see them get better grades.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Awesome. I got it right. Okay, cool. Is there anything else? And then they go a little bit longer. And obviously, this takes time. And my rate allows for those kind of lengthier conversations to see if I'm the right fit. By the time we get to the rate and the insurance, it's irrelevant
Mm-hmm.
because they've discovered that I listen to their problems and I'm
Right.
willing to engage it and I fully understand it. And that's before we've even stepped into the room. And so that's a
Mm-hmm.
mistake. I used to answer that question because I thought that was the real issue. Do they take my insurance? The real
Yeah.
issue is, do they have the ability to help me?
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. And that's a classic, as long as I've been doing this and doing consulting and all of that sort of thing, one of the things about marketing and the messaging that we get out to people, and this is either, if you're just talking to people on the phone or what's on your website or any of that sort of thing, is you want people to understand the potential transformation that can happen by them coming to
Mm-hmm.
you, because that's what they're interested in. They've got a problem that they're working on or they're struggling with. And you want to be able to convey to them, yes, I can help you with this transformation. And this is what it will possibly look like for you once you go through this process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, that's marketing 101 within private practice, or within our this field, is just helping people get an understanding of what it is that they are wanting to change.
Yes, that's totally
Yeah.
right. And that insurance question has nothing to do with transformation.
It's not, again, not to get too far on a rabbit trail, but I remember talking with a friend one time, and they were talking about, yeah, I went to therapy one time. It just didn't really help much with, and it was almost like, okay, I went to therapy, and I asked him, I says, okay, what was it that you went to therapy for? What was the change you were looking for?
Mhm.
And that kind of struck them.
Mm,
It's kind of like almost, and I think particularly since COVID, it's kind of like people where going to therapy is a badge of honor.
right.
It's not as stigmatized, which is great, but really without any sort of direction or intention behind what you're
Mm,
trying to change, I think is
hmm.
important. And I think when you can get to that with people on the front end, I think it does help with seeing the value in what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. So what have been some surprises for you about private practice since you've gone into it on your own?
Yes. I'm trying to embrace the challenges and the surprises as fun, right? There are
Uh-huh.
opportunities in work clothes, as I've heard on another podcast.
Uh-huh.
And so, at first I want to be like, oh, surprises. Hopefully we can get to a place in the practice where there's never any surprises. That's not going to happen, right? Even in
Mm-hmm.
marketing, there's just whatever's working today, it probably won't work in 10 years. We talk about, oh, you got to be on Instagram. Well, Instagram wasn't around 20 years ago, and it,
Mm-hmm.
it might not be around in 20 more years. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
surprises. I have been very surprised that no one and this is connected to marketing, no one cares about my degree or my grades. Certainly they don't care about my
Mm-hmm.
EMDR training. They don't care about
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I'm almost a registered play therapist. When I open it up to questions, they don't even know to ask that, right? And so the
Mm-hmm.
first thing we like to talk about is, oh, I have these things, I could do this type of therapy for you. if they don't know the difference, they're far more concerned with something else.
Right.
They're concerned
Right.
about, can this person help me and transform it? And so, like they kind of teach you in grad school, like you could tell them what you learned and all this stuff. And I opened up the floor to questions, and not once unprompted has anyone asked me, where'd you go to school? Um, Far more important that I'm like making eye contact with the teen exclusively, uh, really to the exclusion of the parents, so that they know I'm here for him, not for you
Mm-hmm.
guys ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, that just speaks so much louder than whatever letters I have after my name. And I would even connect that to like why I can charge more is because I kind of follow up with that rather than like rely on some of these letters. That's been
Right.
super surprising.
Yeah. 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 And I think yeah, that is an interesting thing because I know one of the things, I used to, when I first started into private practice, um, when I'd meet with a client or a couple or whatever the first time, I would, go through my spiel or, the housekeeping kinds of things and,
Yes,
kind of tell them, um, a little bit about my background and, my experience and that kind of thing. And they weren't interested in that. They wanted to get to what it is they came in to work on. And
hmm
and so now I've changed that up and I go through the basic things about confidentiality and duty to
sure.
report and all the things that we need to do on the front end. Um, but I just shortened that now. Are there any questions you have of me about my background or my experience or anything that you're curious about? And very rarely do people want to know that. Yeah, very rarely. They want to start into, okay, this is my problem. This is what I'm here for, kind of thing. And
That's right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Another surprising thing, this is new. I'm still working on it. And hopefully somebody listening could take this away because it's been really fascinating to me. I kind of have stolen this from a couple of marketing business people, and I it's not surprising necessarily that we hit these windows of like, oh wow, I didn't get a client. I didn't even get a call for a month, which is maybe I knew it was going to happen. It was more disappointing than surprising, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
happened this spring. And I know a lot of practices, and I even listened to one of the podcasts interviewing someone on here. A lot of practices have slowed down. There's a lot of reasons for that being, all of these online companies and whatnot. And so I experienced a month of not getting a single call.
Wow.
Very
Mm-hmm.
surprising, very
Mm-hmm.
disappointing. And I was kind of stuck in like, I could use some hours to finish out my license. I could use some dollars here. This would be really important.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a super surprising thing that came out of the necessity of something. I don't need one client for 50 minutes once a week or once every other week. I
Mm-hmm.
need like 5 or 10 clients on the next call. And so I
Yeah.
just started brainstorming like, what are the most frustrating things about this once a week experience for particularly the niche of teen boys. And so I just started listing. I'm like, what do parents always complain about? They complain that they have to take their kid out of school. That's infuriating, right? You have to go pick
Mm-hmm.
them up, you have to drop them off, you have to wait an hour, drop them off again to school, hope that you remember to get a note from the counselor, all these things. And so I just started brainstorming like all these problems. And so this guy I was listening to was talking about making something like super expensive and providing a lot of value as another option because I desperately really needed it in that month, right? And so I just made this thing I called it a 4-week program. I basically said you can do this therapy in 12 weeks and it's going to be painful because it's a lot. You have to come all the way. Or I have this 4-week program. I do a bunch of assessments at the beginning. At the end, we meet for 2 hours instead of 1 hour. And I throw in 2 parent sessions for 90 minutes because that's what you really want too, is to kind of
Mm-hmm.
help. I can help you think through how to parent, right? Package
Right.
it up. It's a total cost, $26.50. If you have the resources and the time, this is a really good thing. If not, we can totally do the 50-minute sessions.
Right.
So many people have said yes to the four
Wow.
week program.
Wow.
And that's why when we talk about that internal struggle, if I'm willing to say, no, no, I provide value because I've actually thought on your behalf of what
Hmm.
would help you, and it's in this form, I can also do the other form. That's totally fine. We can do something in the middle. I don't really care. But yeah,
Hmm.
totally surprised that people, I actually had somebody who didn't even, you know, what we were going back to before, where I said, they asked,
Hmm.
like, what's your rate? And I said, we can talk about that. I want to talk about your problem. And I also have this program that could really solve your problem potentially. They
Hmm.
forgot to ask about my rate, and I forgot to tell them. They didn't even know the
Hmm.
price of the 4 week program. Super
Yeah.
surprising.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think, it's interesting, how we mark time around COVID, but it's I think what people learned in along the same vein, I prefer to meet people in person. But
Hmm.
yeah, again, just an idea is if you want to have a telehealth session with me, or I'm just saying this hypothetically, we can do that, but it's going to be this much as opposed to coming in person. And
Mm-hmm.
so, excuse me, in many ways, they're paying for the convenience of not having to travel to your office and travel back and that kind of thing.
So you
And
charge
so,
more for telehealth?
no, no, I'm not saying I do, but I mean that's just I was just kind of thinking out loud there with that about,
Yeah.
but offering to people like you've said, okay, this is going to be more convenient for you and more intensive and all of that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and you're really going to better get to what you're working on quicker by
Mm-hmm.
doing it this way, and people are willing to pay a premium for that.
Yeah. And to your point, they want the transformation, and
Hmm.
they also want to know how long it's going to take. And so my answer is it depends. How
Yeah.
much do you want to come? Obviously, resources, you have to factor that in,
Hmm.
and there's other places we can figure out. I have a couple of sliding scales, like we can work through it. But if you want it to take 12 weeks at 1 hour a week, that's how long it takes. If you want to take 4, you could do it this way.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. I love that. I love that idea about packaging it in that way. I think and I think particularly for cash-based practices, that makes it much easier to do that sort of thing.
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I couldn't have done any of this if I wasn't in the practices that really allowed me to kind of operate with a little bit more autonomy, which is
Yeah.
what's so exciting about being on my
Right.
own.
Right. Right. So do you think that where you are located geographically makes it easier to be a cash-based practice? I've
Hmm.
always had this, and I'm willing to hear other ideas on this, but I've always felt like you have to look at the demographics of your area to kind of
Hmm.
look
Hmm.
at, okay, can I charge more? Can I be more of a premium service? Are there enough potential clients? And it has to usually be, I usually think of it as being in a larger metropolitan area,
Hmm.
like Memphis or Nashville, or I'm speaking Tennessee, but I mean other places across the United States where there are large populations, more people to draw from for potential clients. As opposed to where I am, is a small metropolitan
Hmm.
area, but we're surrounded by a large rural area, and then I made the decision to accept insurance based on that demographic. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that.
that's that's very thoughtful. What I hear in there is that there's intention behind it
Mm-hmm.
rather than, or one strategy is just to look at what everybody else is charging and charge the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not what you did. And so I'm not entirely sure about the geography, but Memphis, it has a huge disparity in wealth that's
Mm-hmm.
been shown. And so, another piece to my work is that I have a contract with a charter school where the
Mm-hmm.
charter school has grants and opportunities, and they pay for my counseling services. So it's really interesting that, of course, those students would not be able to afford the services that I provide on the private practice side. And so I don't technically have as full of a private practice because I spend my time doing that on the school side. So maybe an answer is based on your geography, you can be more creative, think that's where
Mhm.
groups can come in. Groups are a great way for people to access that care for usually a smaller rate. Um,
Mhm.
that's what's been fun about the private practice is the creativity. Okay, based on where I am, should I niche more and then offer this telehealth to kind of cover the cost? I operate on that principle is I'm going to provide excellent value at a high price because that allows me to be able to give away things for free. I don't have to be as concerned if I have 5 sliding scale clients versus, oh, I have to, book out my calendar completely with this rate or something like that. That's just
Mhm.
kind of what I've adopted. And I think that question speaks to it. It's just being aware of what's around you, who's around you, how to serve them without burning out, and being able to pay your own
Mhm.
bills.
Oh, right, exactly, and it's going to be unique to every practice. I mean, and it's and the other thing I would say is that what you come up with doesn't have to stay that way. You can
Hmm.
transition to other ways of doing things.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah, good. Well, Jarrod, I know we've got to be mindful of our time and your time. And what sort of parting thoughts would you have for us today?
Well, we didn't get to talk about journaling. I heard you do that
Mm.
faithfully every day.
Yes,
That might be
yes,
one
I
thing
do.
I probably journaled like when is my caseload gonna fill up and
Uh, Right,
all of
right.
the things that I've been struggling with. So I wanted to connect with you on that. Yeah, final thoughts. Yeah, it was really annoying in grad school. And I think this is an underlying thing to all of what we talked about is niching. They always ask like, what is your population that you want to work with? And I got annoyed by that because I'm like, do I have to pick one? And the reality
Hmm.
is it really helps. It really helps to help
Hmm.
to pick one because you hear a lot of people who start their counseling program with they would say, well, why did you come into counseling? And you might have a specific story or two, but the general thing is you're going to say, well, I want to help people. Of course. Yeah, I'd be
Hmm.
concerned if you didn't want to help people.
All
But I would
right.
encourage people to put a little bit more behind that, change some pronouns, change some reasons why, rather than I want to help people. You could say, I am going to help teenage boys find purpose, meaning, and peace through counseling. Well, now I know which job to go after. And
Hmm.
now I know who I'm supposed to network with. Because if you
Right.
don't know teen boys or you're not connected to parents who have teen boys, you're not going to really be able to help me fulfill my mission. But if my mission is I want to help people, who knows who I'm trying to help it and in what ways and what
Right.
capacities. And so I just
Exactly.
challenge
Yeah.
people listening. I am, on my website is going to be a page that's dedicated to, I did all this data tracking as I've finished my license, down to the quarter of an hour and some of the things that you talked about, like how much money do you make? What was the licensure process? I'm putting that together for people to see. Here's what it took. Here are the bad things that happened. Here are some of the good things that happened. Here's the timeline. And so hopefully
Hmm.
that can be very valuable to people who are both trying to imagine if private practice is for them, or if they're in you know, the process of getting licensed or even in grad school.
And I would add to that too, with thinking about the niche that people or niche, however you want to say that people choose, is also pick something that you're passionate about, something that you
Yes.
that energizes you, that
Yes.
it's we say it all the time. Pick your ideal client. What is that? Who are the clients that
Yes.
you work with that feed you and energize you and make you feel good about the work that you're doing? And that's a huge clue into what your niche should be.
Yes. And I understand there are people who say, like, if it's part of your own story, you have to be careful, right? Because we don't want to put our stuff on our clients. But more
Hmm.
often than not, the niche is your story. I
Yes,
really believe
yes,
that.
absolutely,
My parents were
absolutely, yeah,
divorced at 10 years old. I saw porn at 11. I'm going to be passionate about teen mental health for my whole life because of that.
right,
And it could change because suffering happens but really your story is going to come from suffering somewhere. It could have been a
yeah,
close friend who had something happen to them and you're really passionate about
hmm,
making that happen. But yeah, I really think it comes out of your story. And just pick one part of your story, niche into
yeah,
that. So don't be scared of it. I think it gives you more freedom, helps you
hmm,
kind of say no to some things so you can really say yes to others.
So true. Well, Jarrod, tell folks where how they can get in touch with you if they would like to and continue a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn. That's kind of the social media that I found isn't completely destroying me and draining. I think
Right.
I get a little envious, like you said, of comparison, but overall it's okay. So LinkedIn, you can
Uh,
find me there. And then my website is jarrodhoffman.com. There's some resources there. I'll be publishing that kind of project with my friend on the data in the next, hopefully by the time this airs, that'll be open. And then I have a quiz. Does your team need therapy? And so
hmm
that's just a really shareable thing. If you're working with a parent who is wondering, is my teen going crazy or is it just a regular teen thing?
Uh-huh.
Use that quiz, share it, and that could be helpful for some of your clients.
Awesome. And we'll have those links here in the show notes and the show summary for people to get to easily. Well, Jarrod, it's been great having this conversation, and hopefully we can have another conversation here soon.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for the work you're doing to support people like me who are, trying to succeed in private practice.
All right. Thank you.